One of my favorite genres of games is horror games. Resident Evil on the PlayStation 1 was the game that sort of introduced me to horror games, and I loved it. Growing up, I loved the Friday the 13th movies, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I've always just sort of loved horror stuff. It's always really interested me, and it's been a genre that I'm really into. Fatal Frame on the Wii U, one of my favorite games on the platform. Even though Nintendo of America didn't do a physical release on that. Good job, Nintendo. Let's go digital only on that because, you know, the game's not freaking huge. Anyways, so I was browsing the Nintendo Switch's eShop and I saw a game called Perception, and it was a horror game, and I was like, this looks kind of cool. You know, I'm looking for a good horror experience. It is the horror sort of season. You know, we're just coming out of Halloween. So let's check it out. It was only $15, so I decided to buy it and review it for you guys. So what is Perception all about? Is this a game you should check out on the Switch's eShop? Let's talk about it and let's find out what Perception brings to the table. Science has proven that if you lose one of your main 5 senses, your other senses become heightened. And that's actually a very important thing in Perception, because you play as a blind girl named Cassie. No, I'm serious, you're blind. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if you're blind, how do you play a video game? How do you see stuff? Well, that's sort of one of the interesting mechanics in Perception. You see, like I said, Cassie is a blind person, but her other senses are heightened, and one of those senses is sound. So what she does is, by a tap of the cane, you can visualize things that are in your area. So Cassie keeps having these reoccurring dreams of a mansion in the Northeast and some horrific things. She keeps seeing like a tree and a noose and stuff like that. So she's trying to figure out why she keeps having this reoccurring dream. She goes to this mansion and then continues and starts to explore it. And once you're inside of the mansion, you see sort of how the game works with the tapping mechanism. You tap your cane and things just sort of illuminate into what Cassie believes they would look like. And there's other sound things. So if you hear like a grandfather clock, a dripping of water, a fire crackle or whatnot, you'll be able to visualize those different things. And at first it's a bit different, you know, because you seem to be tapping your cane a lot, but once you get used to it, it's actually pretty cool. It actually really sets a good feel for the game. And one of the important things in this game is the story. The story is really the main driving force in this game. It tells more of a story than it does a gameplay thing. It's kind of one of those walking simulators, but I don't necessarily hate walking simulators as long as they're done right. And I think Perception actually does some things right. The main thing Perception manages to do right is really set a creepy environment, because I don't necessarily like jump scares. You know, that's what a lot of horror games have really boiled down to, are just these jump scares. They've got rid of the creepy atmosphere, the creepy environment, just that unsettling feeling. And Perception really has that unsettling feeling because you're all alone in this mansion. It's dark, it's quiet, you're blind, so you're having to use visual cues from your cane and sort of sense what's around you. And I think they did a good job capturing that. Obviously, I've never been blind, but you know, that's something that's in itself is pretty horrifying to me, because you know, vision is very important in life, and you know, to not have that sense, you know, you take it for granted. And this game sort of puts things into perspective for you. It gives you a perspective of what it would be like as a blind person. So pretty interesting stuff. You know, I like the way that, you know, things illuminate, everything looks nice and clean. The mansion itself is huge, and you'll be going back and forth all throughout this mansion trying to move the story along. Cassie also has a cell phone, and in the cell phone you have people calling her, trying to figure out what she's doing, why she's going there. Of course, there are some, you know, scary things that are calling her as well. There's some text related messages that you get, and about halfway through the game you also get another mechanic with that phone, and that's the ability to take pictures, and then a operator tells Cassie what the picture is so that she can visualize it, and it sort of tells backstories on other characters. It's very interesting. It seems like they thought out things pretty well. As far as how it would be to be, you know, a person vision impaired going throughout a mansion trying to solve a mystery. And you're not alone in this mansion. You know, physically, yes, you are alone, but there is an evil spirit within this mansion, because there's lots of, you know, creepy stuff going on in this mansion. You're pretty much trying to solve the mystery of what took place with the family inside of here. And it touches on a lot of dark subjects, you know, suicide, depression, you know, post-traumatic stress from having a baby and stuff like that. Medication, like there's a lot of stuff going on here. Murder, burning, like, you know, it's like your typical Mario game, you know, it tackles all of the big, you know, sort of creepy subjects. So there's a lot of, you know, dark subject matter in this game. And as you progress throughout the game, the house starts to listen to you. And what do I mean by that? Well, basically, the more you use your cane, the more this demonic presence starts to follow you and tries to eliminate you from the house, because obviously the demonic presence does not want you in the house. So you start to have to figure out, you know, how often should I use my cane? Where am I going? Am I able to navigate this area without tapping too much to create noise? Is there stuff going on, natural noise like a grandfather clock or a fire crackle, that will illuminate my path enough? It's sort of like a checks and balances thing. It keeps you on your toes, and it's pretty interesting. I like the atmosphere. I like the feeling of something always watching you and that can attack you at any point in time. Now, there's 3 different ways to play the game. There is a way to play the game where it's primarily just story, you can't die. There is a way to play the game that I played it where you can die, but there are checkpoints, and then there's a way to play the game where there are no checkpoints, so you have to do it all in one playthrough. The game itself is not all that long. It could be done in about 4 to 5 hours, and obviously it'll be quicker once you know, sort of know where you're going. But honestly, Perception, it's not a bad game. You know, I like the mechanic of not being able to see things. I like the mechanic of having to rely on audio a lot, and you know, they did a good job with it. The audio in the game is really well done. All the voice acting is pretty good. All the environmental sounds are really good. The graphics, obviously, you know, they're not all that great because you're playing as a blind person. It sort of has like a stencil outline to it, but I think it gets the job done. You know, it's obvious that this was actually a Kickstarter game that was crowdfunded and then came to various platforms, so there wasn't a huge budget for this game, but within the constraints of both the story and of course technical limits and, you know, money limits, I think they did a solid enough job. It's not a game that's going to be in my top 10. It's not a game that's going to be one of my favorite horror games of all time or anything. Definitely not a timeless game, but it's a solid horror game. I enjoyed the story from start to finish. I enjoyed having to hide from these demonic presences when they tried to attack me, and I enjoyed exploring this mansion and learning more about it. It was a really interesting game, and I'd really be interested to see if they would ever do a sequel with this sort of thing, you know, or maybe continue to play up, you know, maybe a deaf person or something, like, you know, discover other senses that are missing that from a person and then sort of amplify their senses that they have and then do a game with that. It's really interesting, you know? You don't see that sort of stuff in games often, and I think they did a good job of it. So if you're looking for, you know, a solid horror experience, something that'll make you feel uneasy, something with an interesting story, you should check out Perception. You know, it's available on a multitude of platforms. I think it's on the Xbox One. I know it's on Steam. I know it's on PS4, but I like the Switch version. It looks great docked. It looks great in handheld mode, although not quite as scary in handheld mode unless you're playing like in the dark with like a blanket over your head and like a light shining on your face, like, "Aah!" But it's a cool game. I enjoyed it, and I'm glad I picked it up. Like I said, 15 bucks in the eShop. Check it out if you're looking for a spooky experience. I think it'll scratch that itch for you. Let me know in the comments section down below if you've ever checked out Perception, and if so, what you thought about the game. And thank you for checking out this review. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and as always, I will catch you guys next time. Later.
RGT NA5, RGT NA5. RGT NA5.